The Black Storm was a name whispered in fear, a nightmare spoken of only in hushed tones. It was no ordinary storm. It didn't just bring rain or wind, it brought death. No one who had ever gone near it had returned. Not a single ship, not a single soul. In the heart of the galaxy, a group of fresh Federation cadets had been given a mission. A dangerous one. A mission that most of their instructors had tried to talk them out of. But as always, the Federation insisted. Someone had to go. The alien forces behind the Black Storm were growing stronger. They needed information, and the cadets were to be the ones to get it. Among the new recruits was Cadet Emily Quinn. She was small, even for a human, with short, dark hair that was always a little too messy and a determined look in her eyes. She had come from a small, unknown colony on the edge of space, nowhere special, no great family name to boast of. But she had dreams, and she was determined to prove that being human didn't mean being weak. She had spent years training for moments like this. The Black Storm, though? No one had trained for this. The storm was an enemy so wild, so unpredictable, that even the most experienced soldiers were terrified. As Emily stood at the edge of the launch bay, watching the rest of the cadets prepare for the mission, a cold sense of fear crept up her spine. The others didn't look nervous. They looked resigned. They had seen the records. The Black Storm consumed everything it touched, and the Federation's best had failed time and time again. No one survived. But Emily wasn't like the others. She had a fire inside her, a drive that refused to quit. She had to believe that there was a way, that if she didn't try, she would be letting down everyone who had ever believed in her. And so, when it was time to board the shuttle, she didn't hesitate. Inside the cockpit, her hands shook as she double-checked the coordinates. The voice of Captain Garin crackled through her headset, his tone heavy with the weight of command. Cadet Quinn, this mission isn't like the others. The Black Storm isn't just a storm, it's a living thing. It'll tear you apart if you're not careful. Stay focused and don't do anything stupid. Emily swallowed hard. She had heard it all before. Everyone was afraid. But if there was one thing she had learned during her training, it was this. Fear was the enemy, and as long as she could push it down, she could face whatever came her way. Her shuttle was one of 5, a small convoy set to enter the storm's outer edge. The Federation had sent their best pilots, but Emily's heart still raced. The storm was already on the scanners, swirling like a massive, dark cloud in the distance. It seemed almost alive, pulsing with power. As they flew closer, the storm grew in size and intensity, a wall of blackness that stretched as far as the eye could see. The shuttle's hull rattled with each passing minute, the storm's energy crashing against them like an angry ocean. The others had their eyes fixed on their instruments, their faces pale. No one spoke. There was no need. The storm itself was a message, a warning. No one was supposed to survive this. Emily gripped the controls tighter. Her breath came in short bursts. She knew they had to keep moving forward. The mission was simple: get to the heart of the storm, retrieve the data, and leave. Easy, right? But deep down, Emily knew something was wrong. She could feel it in her bones. The storm wasn't just a force of nature, it was alive. Hold tight, Captain Garin's voice came over the comms again, sounding almost strained now. We're entering the heart of it. The storm lashed out, shaking their ship violently. Lights flickered. The sound of metal groaning against the pressure echoed through the shuttle. Emily's stomach lurched as the ship dipped, then climbed. It was no longer flying through the storm, it was being dragged into it. Panic began to spread among the cadets. One of the ships in their convoy started to veer off course, its signal dropping off the radar. Another ship was swallowed by the storm, just like that, gone. The others fought to keep control, but Emily could see their faces now. Terror, desperation, the storm was winning. And then, without warning, Emily's shuttle was hit. The hull cracked. The cockpit filled with a blinding white light, followed by the deafening sound of an explosion. Everything went dark. Emily awoke to chaos. Her body ached as though every bone had been shattered. The shuttle had been torn apart. Her comrades were scattered, injured, or worse. She couldn't see them clearly. Everything was a blur, spinning around her. But one thing was clear: they were no longer in control. They had crashed. The Black Storm wasn't just a storm. It was a force of destruction, relentless and unyielding, and it had claimed them. Emily pushed herself up from the wreckage, her breath coming in shallow gasps. She was alive. That was all that mattered. But the others, were they? Was she the only one left? And then, in the distance, something moved. It was the alien leader, the one they'd come to find, the heart of the Black Storm. It was still alive. And Emily Quinn was about to make the choice that would change everything. The crash had torn Emily's world apart. Her shuttle was in ruins, twisted metal scattered across a rocky, alien landscape. The wind howled around her, carrying with it the sharp sting of debris and the promise of danger. Her head throbbed and her body ached from the impact. She forced herself to her knees, tasting blood in her mouth, but she wasn't dead. That was all that mattered. She wasn't dead. Around her, the remnants of the mission were scattered like forgotten toys. The other cadets, where were they? She couldn't see them through the smoke and dust. Panic began to crawl up her spine, but she slammed it down. She couldn't afford to panic. "Focus, Emily," she whispered to herself, wiping the blood from her brow. "Focus." The black storm was still raging, its winds tugging at the wreckage, threatening to tear the shuttle's remains apart. The storm's energy pulsed through the air, crackling with dangerous intensity. Emily could feel it vibrating in her chest, like the storm itself was alive and angry. She stumbled to her feet, forcing herself to take in the chaos. There was no time to be weak. She had to find her comrades, but the landscape around her was alien, unfamiliar, and twisted. The ground seemed to ripple, shifting in ways she couldn't understand. Strange, dark clouds swirled overhead, their shapes bending in unnatural patterns. She was in the heart of the black storm now, and the storm was not just a storm. It was something far more sinister. Somewhere in the distance, a noise caught her attention. A low, rumbling growl followed by the sound of something massive moving through the wreckage. Her heart skipped a beat. She knew that sound. The alien leader. It had survived. The storm had spared it, perhaps because it was part of the storm, its commander, its force of nature. Emily's breath quickened. She couldn't believe it. She had to find a way to stop it, to bring it back to complete the mission. But as her vision cleared, she saw something worse, scattered bodies, twisted and broken, her fellow cadets or what was left of them. Her stomach churned, but she couldn't let herself break down. She was the last one left. She had to stay strong. In the distance, she saw a shadow moving, enormous and powerful. It was coming toward her. There was no time for hesitation. Emily's instincts kicked in. She dropped to the ground and crawled toward a pile of wreckage, hiding herself from sight. The alien leader's massive form loomed into view. It was tall, towering over her like a mountain of muscle and bone. Its skin was a sickly shade of green, its eyes glowing with cold fury. It seemed to be scanning the wreckage, its sharp senses picking up the faintest movements. It was looking for survivors, no doubt to finish them off. Emily's pulse raced. She couldn't stay hidden forever. She needed a plan. The alien's eyes scanned the wreckage as it approached her hiding spot. Emily held her breath, hoping it wouldn't find her. She could feel the heat from its body as it drew nearer, its heavy footsteps shaking the ground beneath her. It was too close. She had to move. Without thinking, Emily grabbed a piece of twisted metal from the wreckage and held it in front of her. It wasn't much of a weapon, but it would have to do. Her heart pounded as she watched the alien move closer. She couldn't wait any longer. With a burst of adrenaline, she leapt from her hiding place, slamming the metal shard into the alien's leg. The creature howled in surprise, stumbling back. Emily barely managed to roll out of the way as the alien swung its massive arm in her direction. She dodged, the air crackling with the force of the blow. It was fast, too fast. The alien roared, its voice deep and resonant, a sound that rattled her bones. But Emily didn't hesitate. She was fighting for her life and for the mission. She needed that intel. She couldn't let it get away. She scrambled to her feet, using the wreckage for cover as she darted between obstacles, staying just out of the alien's reach. Every move she made was calculated, every second a battle against exhaustion. Her body screamed for rest, but her will kept pushing her forward. The alien charged again, faster this time, its eyes locked on her with deadly focus. Emily's pulse raced, but she wasn't going to back down. She couldn't. As the alien reached for her, Emily ducked low, slipping between its massive legs. She could feel the heat of its body, the raw power it exuded, but she wasn't afraid. She had nothing to lose now. This was her moment. Emily swung the metal shard up into the alien's side, just below its ribcage. It shrieked, a sound that pierced the air, and stumbled back, clutching its wound. For a moment, Emily saw the alien falter. It was vulnerable. But she wasn't done. She couldn't stop now. With every ounce of strength she had left, Emily leapt onto the alien's back, wrapping her arms around its neck. She was small, but she wasn't weak, and she wasn't going to let this monster escape. The creature bucked and howled in fury, its hands clawing at her, but Emily held on, refusing to let go. She fought with everything she had, driven by one single burning desire, to survive. And as she struggled against the alien's strength, a voice in her mind whispered, "You can do this. You have to." The world was spinning, and everything hurt. Emily was shaken awake by the screech of metal twisting and cracking. Her eyes opened, but all she could see was smoke, dust, and flashes of light. She gasped for breath, her chest tight, and the overwhelming weight of silence pressed in on her ears. It took a moment for her mind to catch up to reality. Her shuttle was in pieces, scattered across the alien planet's jagged surface. She tried to move, but her body felt like it had been smashed by 100 tons of stone. Her arm was pinned under the remains of the cockpit, and her head was throbbing as if someone had cracked it open. She couldn't tell where the wreckage ended and the ground began. "Focus, Quinn," she muttered to herself, forcing her eyes to stay open. "You're not dead, you're still alive." With a groan, Emily pushed against the wreckage. Pain shot through her side, but she refused to stop. She had to get out. She had to survive. There was no one else left. Her mind flashed to the others, her fellow cadets. The crew, were they okay? Were they alive? She forced herself to crawl out from under the mangled remains of the shuttle. The air tasted strange, thick with dust, and the sky overhead was a swirl of dark clouds and energy. The black storm hadn't let up. If anything, it was worse now. The wind howled like an animal in pain, tearing through the wreckage and throwing debris in every direction. Emily's eyes scanned the area, desperate for any sign of the others, but all she could see was destruction. Broken bodies, wrecked ships, the storm howling in the distance, louder now. She stumbled forward, her legs shaky as she forced herself to move. Her breath came in ragged gasps as she fought the overwhelming sense of dread that was creeping in. "Come on, Quinn, get it together," she whispered, wiping the sweat from her brow. Her fingers brushed over a jagged cut on her face, but the sting didn't matter. Nothing mattered except getting out of here. Then she heard it. A low, rumbling growl that sent a chill down her spine. It was distant at first, but then it grew louder, closer. Her heart skipped a beat. She knew that sound. The alien leader. The one they had come to capture. The one the Federation had sent them to find. The creature they all feared. Emily's pulse raced as she turned toward the noise, her eyes narrowing. The beast was near. Her instinct screamed at her to hide, to run, but there was nowhere to go. She was in the heart of the storm, and the alien was closing in. Think, think, think," Emily muttered, panic beginning to claw at her chest. She needed to find something, anything, to defend herself. Her eyes darted around, but there was nothing useful, just broken metal and shards of their destroyed shuttle. The growl grew louder, then louder still. Emily's breath hitched. She couldn't run. There was nowhere to run. She had to fight. Before she could think it through, the alien appeared. Towering over her, its green skin slick with blood, its eyes glowing with a cold, deadly rage. It was massive, a hulking creature of muscle and sinew. Its twisted form seemed to move with unnatural grace as it stepped through the wreckage, its gaze locking onto her. Emily froze. For a moment she couldn't breathe, couldn't think. Everything in her screamed for her to run, to hide, to escape, but she didn't, she couldn't. Instead, she stood her ground. "You don't get to win," she whispered through gritted teeth, every part of her trembling. Her body was battered and broken, but her spirit was still intact. She wasn't going to let it take her, not like this. The alien roared, a sound that shook the very ground beneath her. It charged at her, its massive arm swinging, aiming to crush her. Emily dodged at the last second, her body moving on pure instinct. The wind howled around her, but she didn't pause. She couldn't. The creature was faster than anything she had ever seen, and its claws were razor-sharp. It swung again. Emily ducked, barely missing the deadly arc of its fist. The alien's speed was terrifying, but Emily was small. She was quick. The creature snarled in frustration and lunged at her. This time, Emily wasn't fast enough. It caught her by the arm, lifting her off the ground with terrifying ease. She gasped, feeling her arm burn with pain. But she didn't stop. She couldn't. With a yell, Emily kicked out, her foot connecting with the alien's chest. It stumbled back just enough for her to break free. She didn't waste the opportunity. She grabbed a jagged piece of metal from the wreckage and swung it at the alien's side. It was clumsy, desperate, but it worked. The alien staggered, and Emily saw a brief flicker of surprise in its glowing eyes. She wasn't finished yet. She pushed herself to her feet, ignoring the pain that screamed through her body. The storm raged around them, the chaos of wind and destruction, now nothing compared to the chaos inside her. She was scared. She was injured. She was alone. But she was alive. And she wasn't going to die here. The alien growled again, its fury growing. But Emily Quinn, battered and broken, had made her decision. She would fight, and she would win. The alien was furious. Its massive claws swiped through the air with terrifying speed, slashing at the wind, at the ground, at Emily herself. The creature was faster than anything she had ever seen. Each swing felt like a hammer smashing through steel. Emily could feel the heat of its breath as it came for her again, its glowing eyes narrowing in on her small form. Her heart raced, but she pushed the fear away. This was it. There was no running, no turning back. She had to fight, or she would die here alone in the heart of the black storm. With a quick breath, Emily dodged the alien's strike, rolling to the side just in time. The ground beneath her feet shifted, as though it too were alive, and she barely managed to keep her balance. She grabbed another jagged piece of metal from the wreckage, holding it tightly, her knuckles white from the pressure. The alien growled and lunged again. Its sheer size made it seem unstoppable, but Emily refused to let the creature win. She wasn't going to let herself die here. She wouldn't be a casualty of the black storm. Emily leaped forward, aiming the shard of metal at the alien's chest. It hit its mark, but the alien barely flinched. The creature's thick skin absorbed the blow, and Emily could feel the metal scrape against the alien's armor-like hide, causing a spark but no real damage. She cursed under her breath. She had to be smarter than this. The alien bellowed in pain, swinging its arm at her in retaliation. Emily ducked, the force of the blow missing her by mere inches. She could feel the air shift with the alien's power. It was like facing a storm itself. Her thoughts raced as she scrambled backward, avoiding another swing. What could she do? What could she? An idea hit her like a sudden lightning strike. Emily had seen the alien's weak point when it had stumbled earlier, just below the ribcage near its heart. It was a vulnerable spot, barely covered by its tough, armored skin. She couldn't stop it with brute force, but she could outthink it. She gritted her teeth, her mind racing for a plan. The storm raged around them, but inside her, a quiet calm began to settle. She wasn't going to die here. She would find a way. The alien snarled, its eyes fixed on her as it moved to charge again. This time, Emily didn't dodge. Instead, she dove beneath its outstretched arms, rolling across the rocky ground, narrowly avoiding the crushing force of its claws. The alien's roar was deafening, but Emily wasn't listening. She had only one goal now. She sprinted toward the wreckage of the shuttle, diving under it for cover. The alien hesitated for a moment, unsure of where she had gone. This was her moment. Emily crawled to the back of the wreckage, where a few pieces of broken tech had fallen. Her eyes locked on an old, half-destroyed plasma grenade. She had no idea if it still worked, but it was her best shot. She snatched it up and quickly assessed the controls. The storm outside was deafening, but she could hear the alien moving toward her. It was coming closer, its heavy footsteps shaking the ground. With a quick motion, she armed the grenade. She had to be quick. She had to. The alien's growl cut through the air, and Emily knew it was now or never. She threw the grenade, not at the alien's body, but directly at the ground beneath it. The alien looked down, its eyes narrowing, but it was too late. The explosion rang out, deafening in its force. Emily was thrown backward, the shockwave knocking her off her feet. She could barely hear the roar of the storm over the ringing in her ears, but she pushed through it, fighting to stay conscious. The ground beneath her shook violently, as though the entire planet were reacting to the explosion. For a moment, everything went silent. Emily's vision swam. She forced herself to her hands and knees, her head spinning. The black storm still raged, but the alien was no longer moving. She looked up. The creature was down on its knees, its thick hide scorched and burned by the explosion. It was weak now. The shockwave had struck it in the chest, right where Emily had aimed. Its breathing was labored, but it was still alive. Emily crawled toward it, her legs trembling beneath her. She wasn't sure how much strength she had left. Everything hurt. She was exhausted, bleeding, but the fight wasn't over. The alien might have been weakened, but it wasn't finished yet. She reached the alien, standing over it, its glowing eyes fixed on her, hatred still burning in them. "You're not going to kill me," she whispered, her voice hoarse but filled with defiance. "Not today." The alien growled, its claws twitching as if it was about to strike. But Emily didn't wait. She raised the metal shard in her hand, her grip tight, and thrust it into the creature's vulnerable chest, right where she had aimed earlier. The alien let out a strangled cry, its body jerking violently, and then it was still. Emily fell back, breathing heavily, her hands shaking from the strain of the fight. She had done it. She had won. The storm was still raging, but she had survived. For now, the black storm had not relented. Even after the battle with the alien leader, the winds howled and the sky seemed to pulse with raw energy. But Emily Quinn was alive. Against all odds, she was still breathing, still standing. The creature's body lay motionless before her, but the storm's fury never stopped. She took a deep, shaky breath, wiping the blood from her hands. Her heart was still racing, but the adrenaline was beginning to wear off. Her limbs were weak, her body battered and bruised from the fight, but she couldn't stop. Not now. Emily took a step back from the alien's corpse, feeling the weight of her exhaustion pulling at her. The storm wasn't just a physical battle. It was wearing her down mentally, too. Every second she stood out here exposed was another second closer to the storm swallowing her whole. The shuttle wreckage was still smoldering, a reminder of how little time she had. The others, they were gone. The thought hit her like a punch to the gut. They had never stood a chance. They had all believed that maybe, just maybe, they could survive the black storm. But she had seen it with her own eyes. The storm didn't care who you were. It didn't care how strong you were. It just took and took until there was nothing left. She couldn't afford to think about them now. She had to focus on getting out. She had to find a way to finish this mission. Her eyes scanned the wreckage. The Federation had sent her to retrieve data, vital intel from the heart of the black storm. The storm had taken everything from her. But if she could complete the mission, maybe their deaths wouldn't be in vain. Maybe she could make sure the Federation would learn from what happened here. Emily turned away from the dead alien, searching for any sign of the data she needed. The wreckage was scattered, nothing but twisted metal and charred remains. There was no sign of the small data disk they had been sent to find. It was small, easy to overlook, but it was crucial. The storm had taken everything, but if she could find it, there might be something left of her mission. Her fingers trembled as she moved through the debris. Every minute felt like an eternity. The storm howled louder now, as if it were mocking her struggle. Her eyes stung from the smoke and wind, but she refused to stop. She couldn't. Then, through the chaos, she saw it. A small metal case, scorched but intact. Her heart skipped a beat. She didn't even hesitate. Emily dashed over, her knees nearly giving out beneath her. She grabbed the case, praying it wasn't broken, praying it wasn't empty. With trembling hands, she opened it. Inside was the data disk. Tears blurred her vision as she held it up to the storm, to the chaos, to the silence that followed the battle. She had done it. She had survived. And now she had what she needed, for the Federation, for her fallen comrades. She didn't know how much time she had left. She didn't know how long it would take for the rescue drones to arrive, but she had no intention of waiting around to find out. The storm was still here, and it wasn't going to stop until it had claimed everything it could. But Emily Quinn wasn't going to let that happen. She had come too far. She had fought too hard. With the data disk in her hands, she made her way back to the remains of the shuttle. The storm battered her, the winds tearing at her clothing, but she fought against it. Her feet were heavy, her body aching, but she kept moving. The ship's emergency beacon was still active, flickering weakly in the distance. If she could reach it, if she could stay alive just a little longer, then maybe, just maybe, she would get out. Her breath came in sharp gasps, each step a battle. The storm's power was overwhelming. It felt like the very air was crushing her, pushing her to the ground. But she didn't stop. She couldn't. Every step was a victory. Every step was one closer to survival. She had the data. She had done what no one thought was possible. She had faced the black storm and lived to tell the tale. Just as she reached the wreckage of the shuttle, her vision began to blur. The storm was pushing her to the edge of collapse, her body screaming for rest. But she kept going, pulling herself forward with sheer will. And then, like a distant whisper, she heard it, the hum of the rescue drones. Hope surged through her, and for the first time in what felt like forever, Emily allowed herself to smile. She wasn't alone anymore. She wasn't going to die here. She had done it, she had survived. And as the storm continued to rage behind her, Emily Quinn took the final step, collapsing just as the rescue drones arrived. The mission was complete. The storm might have torn everything apart, but Emily had emerged from the chaos, not just as a survivor, but as a hero. The black storm hadn't claimed her, not today. The storm raged, its winds howling like a living thing, but Emily Quinn lay on the cold, rocky ground, her body still and battered. The rescue drones had found her just in time, if only barely. She could hear their engines in the distance, growing louder, but everything around her felt muffled, as if the storm itself had swallowed the world. Her body ached with the weight of exhaustion, but her mind clung to the one thing that kept her going, survival. She had completed the mission. She had fought the black storm, and she had survived. The data disk was safely secured, pressed against her chest like a lifeline. For a moment, the storm seemed to quiet, as if sensing her victory. But Emily didn't have time to savor the silence. Her body trembled with fatigue and the pain from the fight. The bruises, the cuts, the broken bones finally caught up with her. She had pushed her body beyond its limits, but now everything seemed to collapse all at once. The last thing she remembered before her eyes closed was the sound of the drones hovering above her, their searchlights casting a soft glow over the wreckage. It was the last shred of hope she needed. When Emily awoke, the storm was still there, but it was distant now, receding as if the worst of it had passed. The air smelled different, clean, fresh. The drones had found her, and now she was safe. But it wasn't the storm that she thought of first. It was the faces of her comrades, the other cadets, the ones who didn't make it. Their voices echoed in her mind, and for a long time she just lay there, too tired to even move. She had made it, but they hadn't. She could still hear Captain Garen's voice in her head, his warning about the Black Storm. No one survives the Black Storm. Those words had haunted her since the moment the mission began, and now that she had lived through it, they didn't feel like a victory. They felt like a heavy weight, an unspoken truth she couldn't escape. One of the drones hovered near her, its metallic arm reaching out to lift her gently. The movement was slow, careful, as though it knew how fragile she was. Emily felt the weight of the drone's touch, its cold metal pulling her from the ground. She tried to sit up, but her body didn't respond. Every muscle screamed in protest. A voice crackled in her ear, the sound familiar and comforting. "Cadet Quinn," the voice of the commander, Captain Garen, broke through the haze of her exhaustion. "Cadet Quinn, do you copy?" She swallowed hard, her throat dry, and then finally she managed to speak, her voice hoarse and weak. "I'm here, sir." The voice on the other end paused, a long silence hanging between them. Then, with the kind of disbelief she had expected, the captain spoke again. You survived?" His voice was quiet, almost hesitant, as if he couldn't quite believe it. "How?" I made it," Emily whispered, her eyes closing again as the pain from the storm and the battle finally caught up with her. She fought to stay awake, to keep speaking, to stay in control of the moment. But her body was too tired. The last few days had pushed her to the brink. "I have the data." There was another long pause, followed by the sound of someone, maybe Garen, breathing heavily into the comms. Emily could almost hear the disbelief in his voice. "By the stars," Captain Garen muttered, "you did it." Emily didn't respond. She couldn't. Her body gave out and darkness took her again. But it was different this time. It wasn't the kind of darkness that came with fear. It wasn't the kind of darkness that whispered of defeat. It was the darkness of peace, of knowing that she had fought with everything she had and won. When she woke up again, the storm was gone. The winds had calmed, and the sky above was a soft shade of blue, almost peaceful. The familiar hum of the rescue drones filled the air, but this time they were no longer a sign of danger or destruction. They were a sign of salvation. Emily slowly opened her eyes, squinting against the brightness of the sky. Her body was wrapped in medical blankets, and she could feel the gentle, rhythmic beeping of a heart monitor beside her. Her limbs felt heavy and her head ached, but the pain was dull now, not sharp. She was alive. And she had done what no one thought was possible. She had survived. Captain Garen's face appeared in front of her, his expression unreadable, but his eyes were full of something that made Emily's heart skip. Relief, pride, maybe even something more. "You made it," he said quietly, his voice soft. "You really did it." Emily looked at him, trying to find words, but there were none. She had been through too much, too many battles, too much loss. But in that moment, with the storm behind her and the data in her hands, she didn't need words. She just nodded, a simple, silent acknowledgement that she had done it, that she had survived, that she had won. The Black Storm had taken everything from her. It had torn her world apart. But in the end, it couldn't take her spirit. The storm had met its match in Emily Quinn, and no one would ever forget the name of the cadet who defied it. The Black Storm had claimed many before her, but Emily Quinn had become the storm's first survivor. And she would carry that victory with her forever. The days after the storm were a blur. Emily Quinn couldn't remember much of the journey back. She had been surrounded by the hum of medical drones and the steady voices of the Federation officers, but everything felt distant, like it wasn't really happening. Her body had been broken by the battle, her mind worn thin by the Black Storm's endless rage. But somehow she had survived. She had made it back. Her first real memory was waking up in the Federation's medical bay, the soft hum of machines surrounding her like an echo. She was still alive, still breathing, but for the first time, Emily felt the weight of what she had endured. The storm had torn through her body, yes, but it had also torn through her heart. The faces of her fallen comrades haunted her every waking moment. Captain Garen, her fellow cadets, none of them had made it out. Emily was the only one left. She was the only one who had defied the storm and survived. The data disk, the reason they had all been sent to the heart of the storm, lay heavy in her hands, a constant reminder of the mission. It was a symbol of her survival, but also of the cost. She had completed the mission, but at what price? "Cadet Quinn," a voice called softly, pulling her out of her thoughts. She turned her head to see Captain Garen standing at the doorway of her recovery room. His face was lined with exhaustion, but his eyes, those eyes were filled with something she hadn't expected: pride. "Sir," she whispered, her voice hoarse from the days of recovery. He stepped into the room, closing the door behind him, and walked toward her bed. There was no need for formalities, no need for words that didn't matter. The moment he stood beside her, it was clear. She had done something no one else thought was possible. "How are you feeling?" Garen asked, his voice gentle but firm. Emily shifted, trying to sit up, but her body protested with aches and soreness. Like I've been through hell, she said with a small smile. She didn't feel like smiling. She didn't feel like doing anything. But there was something about his presence, something in the way he was looking at her that made her want to be strong, even just for a moment. Garen nodded, his expression softening. You're a miracle, Quinn. You should have never made it out of there. No one should have, but you did. You survived when everyone else failed. Her throat tightened. She wanted to say something, anything, but the words caught in her chest. She had never been good with words, especially when it came to this. The guilt, the grief, it was all there, weighing her down. I couldn't have done it without them, she whispered, looking down at the data disk. They fought too, they tried. Garen's gaze softened, and he placed a hand on her shoulder. You don't have to carry the weight of their loss alone, Quinn. You did what they couldn't. You gave everything, and you came back. Emily's eyes burned with unshed tears. She wasn't sure how to process the pain, how to hold it all in. But she knew one thing: the storm had taken everything, but it had also given her something she couldn't quite explain. She had fought for her life. She had fought for her comrades. She had fought for the Federation, and she had won. She had come back not just as a survivor, but as a symbol of what humanity could do when pushed to the limit. Her eyes met Garen's, and for the first time since the storm, she felt something she hadn't felt in days: hope. Not just for herself, but for the future. They had lost so much, but they could still rebuild. They could still keep fighting because she had survived. She had made it through the worst. Thank you, she whispered, the words barely escaping her lips. She wasn't sure if they were for Garen, for the Federation, or for herself, but they were the only words that felt right. Garen gave her a small, approving nod. You've earned that thanks, Quinn, and more. You're not just a cadet anymore, you're a hero. The word hung in the air, and for a moment Emily wasn't sure what to think of it. A hero? Her. The girl who had been the underdog, the one no one had believed in, the one who had just wanted to survive. But the storm had changed her. It had shaped her into someone different, stronger, resilient, someone who could face the worst the universe had to offer and still stand tall. She looked down at the data disk again, holding it tightly in her hand. The Federation would get the information they needed. They would learn from the storm, and they would never forget the name of the cadet who had survived when no one else could. I'll never forget what happened, she said quietly, and I won't let them be forgotten either. Garen's eyes softened. I know you won't. The storm had taken everything, her friends, her comrades, the very planet they had fought to protect, but it had not taken her. She had returned, carrying with her not just the data, but a promise to never give up, a promise to always fight. Emily Quinn had survived the Black Storm, and she would carry that victory, that memory, with her for the rest of her life. The storm had tried to break her, but it had only made her stronger. And she wasn't finished yet.